Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here. So I guess after failing twice, um, I'm able to get back on YouTube. Some really weird things going on YouTube. Thumbs this video up. We are going to continue with Event 201. Had to do a full reboot there. And we're going to go over why that's significant. You know, I get it. People are working from home. A lot of my videos aren't being reviewed. It's all AI bots in the beginning anyway, right? But I want to focus in on Event 21, or Event 21, Agenda 21 maybe, Event 201, especially because check this out, guys. First of all, you know, we talk about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation all the time, right? Because this is put on by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in October of 2019 with the World Economic Forum, Davos. I'm sorry if I've been saying Davos. I'm going to correct myself. I was Davos, all right? And I walk into BJ's this morning, and lo and behold, still no toilet paper, by the way. Every other paper product you can get, still no toilet paper in my BJ's. This is at the very front, all right? At the very front. I mean, the disinfectants are there. The face masks are around now. We have certain people saying that the CDC may mandate face masks within the next 10 days. Those type of things. So aside from seeing this, you know, this was published, I believe, on March 10th. So now 19 days ago. And here's the thing. Let's take a look at this. And thank you to the Burmis Brigade for doing this. Oh, look at that. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The National Health Commission of China. And we all know that China and their CDC have been so honest about their numbers on everything and how they handled the situation. And we know our media covered it very well. So when I do reports on this, I think it's also something to note that I got some weird pushback from some kind of weird account. All right? So as everybody knows, for this Event 201, and thumbs this up, don't worry, we're going to do it. This is going to be a long broadcast. We got quite a bit to go over. For this broadcast, I've been explaining that, and this is going to be a recap for people, in October of 2019, they run this drill with Johns Hopkins University, and it's Thomas Inglesby who is kind of the moderator of this whole thing on behalf of them. And who do we have there? World Health Organization, right? They're chiming in via video. The World Bank, ANZ Bank, the Chinese CDC and George Gao, the American CDC, NBC Universal. And the one we're on right now is about controlling the narrative, shutting down fake news on social media. We're already seeing that. So much to explore there. The parallels are nutty, but we've always said that their novel coronavirus breakout was from South America, from a pig farm. We've never said anything else on here, okay? We've shown the parallels of unelected bureaucrats deciding your fate at a roundtable event, and that's all. So I want you guys to see this. And by the way, this whatever this account is likes their own things, and then they also, you know, retweet their own thing. Hey, Jason, here's statement about, so like, is this like a hired bot to try to fight my misinformation or disinformation? I haven't given you any. About NCOV and our pandemic exercise. What are you talking about? Our pandemic exercise Event 201. And then there's a link. And then you can go to John, I think that's John Hopkins, right? One of them? Yes, that's John Hopkins Center for Health, the check-marked account. Okay, and then some link to you know, the official 201 page. I think, actually, is it right here? Is that what they link to? No, that's a different one. Sorry, guys. So, let me continue here. Thank you so much, Leo P. You keep up the good work, brother. And our partners did not make a prediction during our tabletop exercise. The whole thing was a prediction. What are you talking about? It was a what-if scenario. For the scenario, we modeled a fictional coronavirus pandemic in October of 2019. And then he put in like one of the videos that we've gone over. right? We've never said anything different here. Okay, thumbs this video up, subscribe, and share. So I responded, and by the way, the other person that hearted this, if you want to look at it, is, I believe, one of the actresses that plays one of the roles in this. I could be wrong, but I went to the IMDb page. I couldn't find anything on the Davos forum. But again, it seemed like it was an actress. Okay, so I said, yeah, if you ever watched any of my series, I specifically go over the scenario of a novel coronavirus originating in a pig on a farm in South America. What exactly was your role in this exercise? Because it's we, right? It's our. I'm like, who is this person? Who is this we? Just want to point out that these exercises are purely fictional. Let's straighten out the misinformation. This virus did not originate in Wuhan either. Never said it did. I mean, if you look at my response, it specifically says South America. Like, what kind of weird bot offshore paid account is this? It is neither Chinese virus nor Wuhan virus. And then, add all this stuff. So I respond one more time. I go, once again, who is we and what misinformation? I have not promoted the virus originated in Wuhan. What kind of account is this? So it's bizarre to me that me covering this has like bots coming out. For me, I think, covering this the most in depth out of anybody, right? Because we're going over the whole videos together. With that being said, where are we at? Well, we're at this gentleman talking about the misinformation and disinformation on the internet and social media, and how this roundtable of unelected bureaucrats that we just discussed, and some people are saying they're not bureaucrats, Jason. They're appointed positions. What are you talking about? They're holding meetings to oversee global populations and promote world government based on zero elections by the people. I'm sorry if the semantics aren't to your liking, but my goodness, here we go.
That we are part of this conspiracy theory, that we are supporting this, that wealthy countries will spread out caps to poorer countries. And this is a clearly thing of social media that could be directed via clear crisis communication and confirmed and regular updated information. So I also agree with Matthew. Companies' this responsibility that the CEO talks to the staff, that the CEO improves this information flow, and then we have a chance to get it.
Influence this information flow. Don't question world government, world banks, NGOs, non-government organizations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Don't question NBC Universal. No, no, no.
Channeled.
So in this case, do you think governments are at the point where they need to require social media companies to operate in a certain way? I hear you saying social media companies should not be impaired.
Yep.
But do they need to operate under different conditions? I think Matt alluded to that as well.
Yes, I would say there are specific conditions now, and we have to find a way to cooperate and we have to find solutions for this, but not to hamper them.
Chris?
So I just want to build on Ed's comment about the importance of civil society and faith-based communities. I think, in addition to employers, people trust their neighbors, trust their local community organizations. With 3 million cases in the Americas, you know that local communities around the countries have been responding, whether it's to manage daycare so people can stay in school.
So, again, look at the parallel here. This is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation talking head, okay? Christopher Elias. And Inglesby, you see all over the news. That's the Johns Hopkins University guys. And remember, Johns Hopkins numbers are coming a lot from government officials, a.k.a. the Chinese government. And now that, again, you have more deaths in Italy, more deaths in Spain, on an exponential level than we saw in all of China. And the new narrative in the mainstream is that China got it under control. I don't know if that's correct. So what I want to point out here is Elias is talking about communities. And I'm all for the communities. That's one of the things I've said to prepare, right? I've said other than stockpiling, right? Other than preparing your immune system. Did another workout with my little girls, my nieces this morning. Did a little Kempo X, okay? Trying to keep not only my physical and immune system up, but having a good time, smiling with my family, and building community. So I have talked to my neighbors, but as you see this, some people that can't feed their kids in the morning, right? The breakfast school programs are still going on, all these things. So, he's essentially saying we've got to work with them, and make sure that they're speaking well of this, unelected consortium of minions of the predator class.
School, or go to work. So while the social media can provide better quality information, I think actually local community organizations can help individuals understand how to filter out some of the noise and to act on the good information that's there. I think it's an important lesson that we've learned recently. We're learning as we speak in East Africa with the Ebola outbreak. If you don't have the community trust and engagement, you can't deliver even effective countermeasures.
Why would anybody in East Africa or otherwise believe you? Why would they think you have their best interests at heart? Bill Gates openly talks about mass sterilization. He talks about mass vaccination. He talks about GMO mosquitoes. Genetically modified organisms aren't just, fruits and vegetables, folks. We're talking about wildlife, okay? We go beyond bugs, et cetera, et cetera. And, he did that cool thing where he let them out. Oh, hey, we love Bill Gates. No, I'm not a fan.
Even when you have them. So I think the importance of local community, perhaps married to and as a filter for helping to discern the truth from the misinformation on the technology platforms, is going to be an important part of this response.
And again, when they talk about truth or misinformation, everybody, while they hype up the fear, why aren't we talking about things like vitamin C? Why aren't we talking about those intravenous treatments? Why aren't we talking about the hydroxychloroquine, right? And the regular chloroquine. And we've gone over 2 other drugs, antivirals, that are also on the table. And what they never want to promote, all right? And just to show you this, how they never want to promote it, I'm going to go to my history because we do it live. Thumbs this video up, subscribe, and share. Okay, let's go to STEM. There we go. No, are you kidding me? Is this it? Yes. Nope, that's not it. Wow. I can't believe it. I can't find it. Unusually I can. Let's continue. Basically, it's the stem cell treatment I've talked about, right? Yeah, it's got less than 3,000 views. More people will watch this video than an authoritative source, that we're supposed to be promoting, talk about stem cell treatment and how that has been helpful in this pandemic.
Steve, Brad, and then we'll go down the table here.
Just 2 points. First is that we have to recognize that we are all susceptible to misinformation based on our prior beliefs and experience. And I think with the social media platforms, there's an opportunity to understand who it is that's susceptible in what form to misinformation. So I think there's an opportunity to collect data from that communication mechanism. The second thing is, with that ability, we can identify false information more quickly. We are actually receiving reports about people trying treatments that are purported to be effective but are actually harmful.
So once again, I'm watching this along with you. What did I just talk about? I talked about several things outside of what's being promoted by the mainstream, which is a vaccine, right? Don't get me wrong, Trump's talking about the hydroxychloroquine. Even Cuomo says, hey, we're going to give it a go. Thank you, Cuomo. I appreciate that. I'm not saying that it's the best one. I would much rather see massive vitamin C, but we're also seeing that in Long Island. All right? And here's the thing that I don't think people realize. No matter what, no matter how scripted this is, at least in this real pandemic, not a plandemic like this, of course. No. I mean, there's no parallels whatsoever. Nobody looks good with mass death. So the more lives that de Blasio can seem to save on the surface, or Cuomo can seem to save on the surface, or Trump can seem to save on the surface, they would want that. But at the end of the day, this isn't really a nation-state operation, is it? And we all know those at the top have always talked about population control. And I haven't seen any billionaires drop dead from this yet. I've only seen them bailed out.
Quicker that's recognized and can be countered, the fewer people will fall susceptible to those things.
Okay, thanks, Brad.
Yeah, I don't want to be repetitive. I agree with almost everything that was said. But when we talk about our health, who do we typically trust? Our physicians. And we're not talking about that right now. So, I mean, we need the physicians and the medical community really out there on the forefront talking about this. I remember I had access to local news in Atlanta when the patient was taken care of for Ebola. They came back, and physicians were on there nightly talking about, you know, don't panic. It's okay. This isn't going to go spread. So I would add physicians to it.
Okay. Yeah.
I've got some important news to share from our member companies. Rumours are actually spreading that the antivirals are causing CAPS, and so patients are not taking them anymore. And this is particularly an area where we have government mistrust. On the other hand,
So let's talk about this. As far as I know, at least with the antivirals in this actual coronavirus, COVID-19 pandemic, they're not just giving, hydroxychloroquine to anybody. You have to be diagnosed with this. I'm not sure if you have to be tested for it, but you certainly have to be diagnosed. And I don't think that there's any information trying to spread that the antivirals would spread this disease, but certainly any kind of forced vaccination or, imposed vaccination for certain rights or mass vaccination. Yeah, a lot of people would not want that. Amsterdam, Patty's Thailand, keep up the good work, brother. Have some toilet paper money on me. Well, it'd be great if we could get that toilet paper. I'm stacked up.
it's interesting because we are doing clinical trials in new antiretrovirals and, in fact, in vaccines. And social media, including Facebook, is actually enhancing recruitment. People are going to it, and they're actually seeking information on where they can participate and sign up. And so I sort of wonder that maybe we're in the mistake of reporting and counting all the fatalities and infections, and we're not sharing with people what are the wins. Who are the patient advocates that can say what worked for me, and maybe you should try that. I think we have an opportunity here.
Well, again, with so much misinformation and disinformation in the mainstream media, and the fact, again, what was being pushed, even antivirals. And that I did find this video, and I think it's important to look at this. It's called mesenchymal, and I'm probably butchering that, stem cells, MSCs, okay? Let's look at this. 2,660 views, been up for 6 days. This is from an actual Physiological Society authoritative source. Are you hearing anything about stem cell treatment for this in the mainstream? Anything? Bueller? Are you hearing anything at this round table? Does that mean that these people have your best interests at heart? Do they really care? Or do they care about consolidation, control, power, coming out on top in a pandemic? Just saying.
Okay. George, and then Avril.
Sorry, you go ahead.
No.
By now, we have more cases in China and also death cases reported. And also, my staff told me because there's misinformation and there's some belief. People believe, this is a man-made, some pharmaceutical company made the virus. So there are some violations and even, deaths because of this misinformation. As a, from like the CDC, and I don't know whether Steve agree with me, when you are doing the field work and you like to do some so-called TOT, training of trainers. So we really need to train the health workers, health care workers, their access to the patients, to the public. So make sure they got the right information. So not necessarily, sometimes the health care workers, they know something, but if they are not well trained, they might give the wrong information, but also they might say something, I don't know. Even I don't know, that could hurt. So when I remember such a situation reminded me. When I was in Sierra Leone, and I was interviewed by radio, the national radio, I was asked by one of the audience to say, okay, we believe Ebola was man-made.
Let me just stop this here. That's George Gao. That's the Chinese CDC. That's the guy who obviously helped lie about the numbers there, is continually lying about how it's totally under control as well and how society has restarted. Don't get me wrong, slow rollout probably of more and more society starting, but he's not going to tell you how his nation, after, cutting off Wuhan and the vast majority, if not all, of major production, rolled in their Uyghur Muslim prisoners, right, from West China. He's not going to tell you anything like that. No. But what he is going to tell you in a pandemic exercise put on by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and obviously they're promoting the Chinese narrative, right? At least they're promoting the narrative, at least the original narrative in this real COVID-19 thing, where it's natural, it's not man-made. And what are we hearing? It's natural, it's not man-made. There can't be any conspiracy theories that, oh no, the drugs might hurt me more than the virus, or no, it's not man-made. It's not man-made, it's not man-made, it's not man-made. And right now they're talking about Ebola and the conspiracy theory. They act like there's no bio-warfare programs across the globe. And again, right now, China, Iran, they want to point the bioweapons finger at the United States. Trump and Pompeo want to say it's a Chinese virus. I don't think that either of those things are necessarily true. We live in a very, very, very different world, all right? And no matter what you think, what's currently going on is a global transformative event. I'll say it again. 1929 meets 9/11 in a COVID 1984 event. Ryan Correa says, with social platforms littered with the masses eating what they're being fed, what's a good platform to share thought and information? This is a great question. I mean, I'm also on Rockfin. I mean, that's basically for creators, so that's a little different. I would just say use the tools that are given to you, but don't be afraid to reach out and call somebody or video chat with somebody or talk to somebody and not just post. Have a human relationship with people. Apparently, we're not allowed outside to actually talk face to face. Got to be 6 feet away. Ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Transported from, somewhere. So I think this is very important. We do the TOT. So make sure the healthcare workers have the right information.
Okay, thank you. Avril?
I very much agree with that. So, I think I agree with a lot of what's been said. I'd just add to it maybe by saying that I think one of the things we want to do is work with telecommunication companies to actually ensure that everybody has access to the kind of communications that we're interested in providing, because that's going to be critical for dealing with, obviously the explosion of the disease. And
so let's talk about the telecommunication companies. What she's telling you without telling you is what's going on now is they're using apps, they're using GPS location, they're using your track trace database society that's been incorporated for some time outwardly. We've got to work with those telecommunication companies. We got to make sure the internet's up where we want it, down where we don't. GPS and where we need it.
And then another issue, I suppose, is just through that, if you have a trusted source, I believe in the idea that we shouldn't be trying to control communication, but rather flood the zone, in a sense, with a trusted source that then is influential community leaders as well as health workers, as Brad noted, and others on these issues, in order to try to amplify the message that's coming through. And I think Tim's absolutely right. I certainly seen the value of communicating constantly on these issues so as to continue to deal with, sort of the vacuum that can be created in this circumstance. But
the vacuum, and by the way, this is a former member, I believe, of the National Security Council, probably employed by either a lobbyist group, an NGO, or one of these privatized intelligence firms like Booz Allen Hamilton, Stratfor, Black Cube, etc.
Then also with the comments made about the fact that for all of the disinformation that will be put out, it's going to be important to actually have a response to those questions and to those concerns, as Stephen said. And I understand from staff that actually there are also intelligence sources identifying multiple foreign disinformation campaigns.
Because the intelligence community's never lied to the public, right? They were totally straight with you on the Mueller report, right? And Russian collusion, right? And interference in the election. They were totally straight with that, right? There are lawsuits now involving WikiLeaks, Aaron Rich and his parents, and a bunch of other people that aren't destroying that narrative, right? In the extradition hearings, Assange's lawyers didn't destroy your intelligence narrative, did it? Oh, wait, it did. Why in the mother flippin' heck? And guys, believe me, I want to go a little harder than that, but trying to keep it kid-friendly today, would we ever believe anything out of your analyst's mouth, out of your government mouth, out of your corporate mouth? You mind-controlled Muppet minions of the predator class.
And so on, but it's all a part of a larger piece, which is to say that every time there is something that comes out that is in fact false information that is starting to actually hamper our ability to address the pandemic, then we need to be able to respond quickly to it.
So I have a number of comments here. People want to react to what Avril just said. I see a couple of fingers just went up. Matt and Tim.
I think just to build a little bit on what Avril said is I think as in previous conversations where we've talked about centralization around management of information or public health needs, there needs
centralization for the management of public information. See, we get the private information. That's how we make the big deals in the stock market. That's how we scoop everything up at the end. But for the public, we want to consolidate that information and treat you like pets and children.
to be a centralized response around the communications approach that then is cascaded to informed advocates represented in the NGO communities, the medical professionals, et cetera.
The NGO communities, and then really the medical professionals that we allow to talk. They're representatives. Do you get it? No matter what you're seeing now in real life, it's been scripted in a sense. This is the NBC representative. Make no mistake about it. Public information. Consolidation of a message. Informed advocates.
You mean centralized internationally?
Centralized on an international basis, because I think there needs to be a central repository of data, facts, and key messages.
Tim, you wanted to comment on that, and then we'll go back to regular order here.
Yeah, I think one important thing is there needs to be a sense of two-way communication, which is people on the front lines may be finding out that actually the system's not working as it should. And I think there should be a culture in the communications to feed back to authorities, places where the system is broken down, where supplies are...
To authorities, like myself, from the World Bank, so I know what to invest in and, you know, what second, third, and now first world nation I'll help economically crush.
Short, where there are no health workers, where hospitals are dysfunctional, et cetera. Because that, and then with some credible investigation process, which is that then values the client. The second dimension of it, I think that's really important, is to get individual narratives on this. I mean, the fact is that most people will survive. And that's probably not a widespread public perception. And so people who have lived and survived and can say that they got good care or that they were treated appropriately will help build confidence in the system in a way that perhaps the data doesn't do as effectively.
So let's talk about that in real time. Somebody like Tom Hanks, who supposedly got the virus, and his wife, Rita Wilson, who supposedly got the virus, quarantined, didn't seem to have a rough go of it, will be a great spokesperson for somebody like the World Bank. Okay? I'm just pointing that out. I'm not saying that's necessarily what's going to occur, but anybody that doesn't have to go to the hospital for this, who's not going to be a great spokesperson? Obviously, people that don't survive it or that lose a loved one or that go through a very rough time do survive it and perhaps have permanent lung damage, which has not been widely discussed at all in the United States, but is all over mainstream media internationally. You can find it here too, but barely spoken about.
Steve, Latoya, Sophia, and then Jane.
So I think a couple of things we have to consider are, even before this began, the anti-vaccine movement was very strong. And this is something specifically through social media that has spread. So as we do the research to come up with the right vaccines to help prevent the continuation of this, how do we get the right information out there? How do we communicate the right information to ensure that the public has trust in these vaccines that we're creating? And secondly, news organizations in some countries are right now under a lot of pressure from their governments to provide politically favorable news.
All right, so before we, get to the sloped eye, favorable news for governments, favorable news. Think about how she says that in the same breath, guys. Favorable news, all right? Let's talk about that vaccine propaganda. Sure, let's promote barely tested, untrusted vaccinations. I don't get the flu vaccine. I know most of you guys out there don't get the flu vaccine. There's news today that Facebook and Twitter, under a new bill in the United Kingdom, will have to take off all anti-vax. You're not allowed to talk about vaccines and injuries and facts. You're not allowed to talk about those facts. And in Denmark, they've already kind of mandated the possibility of a vaccine for people. That's medical martial law. And let's get that out to the public. Let's induce fear that they might die, and anybody that doesn't take the vaccine is the problem. And then, in the same breath, she's talking about favorable coverage for governments. Because that's right. Government always deserves favorable coverage when you're talking about the predator class and their fascistic partners that are working with them.
And so we have to think about, this isn't just the United States where we sometimes take the freedom of press for granted. There are countries where the news organizations are owned by the government, and how are they disseminating information, and what do we need to be?
As if the United States news organizations aren't basically owned and run by the government in many senses. As if Google itself is not only a search engine, but an operating system for my phone. The owners of the platform that I am broadcasting to you on right now, all that, they're not in bed with the government. They're not in bed with quantum computing through NASA. They have no other ties in intelligence and storage, right? And neither does Jeff Bezos. Well, I mean, give me a break. Give me a break.
Thinking about how do we communicate with those governments to ensure that misinformation and disinformation is not being spread.
Thanks, Latoya.
That goes along with her. I've received information from my staff saying they're confused about the different authoritarian public health messages that are coming out from all the different sectors, the countries, the states, and different cities. And
by the way, this is the representative of the Marriott hotels. And remember, nationally now, hotels are not only being retrofitted to be makeshift hospitals, but they're also going to be housed or used as housing units for incoming medical staff, right? Even the president yesterday talked about former reservists activating, coming in, volunteering. And as I've told you throughout New York, and I'm going to give you a little hint. All right, I'm in upstate New York. Again, huge medical stuff going on here in Otsego County, Bassett, Fox, several Bassets, okay? And they're pretty much at capacity right now. And that's not me fear-mongering. I'm just telling you. And I can confirm at least 6 cases in my little community that they're treating at the hospital. Okay, that's all I can say. I'm not going to out anybody here and where I'm getting the information, but it's real. Okay, so they've used, I believe it's the Hampton Inn now, that incoming medical personnel are going to be staying. So this is going to be like a pseudo-government contract, right? So again, that's why they have a representative of Marriott Hotels here. And we're getting mixed messages. Do I need to wear a mask? Do I need to not wear a mask?
We're concerned about the differences, what the World Health Organization is, saying versus what their government is saying and what the total consensus are. So with that being said, looking at hotels from that perspective, we're in a bind in knowing how to proceed.
I see. Sophia?
Thank you. I wanted to, the discussion is focusing on mis and disinformation, but I think what's important to counter some of that is to actually put out information or good news stories of people who have actually beat the disease, or best practices in other parts of the world that is delivering on results, and sharing that. But also I agree on the point on having a centralized source of information and a world body that could have garner the respect of everyone.
A world body that could have garnered the respect of everyone. Now, despite whatever the severity is in their fictional scenario, remember, they want positive news stories. And I'm not trying to get you to panic, but positive news stories to me would be the science based in using the MSC stem cell treatment on people and seeing the success rate in real time. Okay? I want real news. I don't want you to pat me on the head like a child and lie to me and tell me everything's okay. I don't want you to scare me into submission and tell me we're all going to die. I'd like the factual stuff, not just the public information that's been consolidated by a respected world organization and fed to me like I am literally your pet. I'm not.
And I think the WHO in this instance might be that source of information. Yeah. And again, using the UN networks on the ground in many of these countries has a UN presence through its resident coordinator systems. And I think based on the Edelman Trust Barometer, the UN still enjoys a lot of trust around the world. So it's a good bet. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane.
So I just want to focus, if I could, for a second, on why we communicate, what the purpose of this communication is. So there seem to be several elements to this conversation, one of which is to get the facts, however you define them.
There you go. I'm glad she said that. What and why are we getting into this, global communication? Let's talk about the facts and how we're going to define facts. Oh, we're going to define facts.
Out there. But let's be completely clear. We have known for many years that tobacco kills you if you consume it. It's a fact. And it's a crapshoot whether you're going to be in the 50% proportion who's going to die very young, but we know this as a fact. There are some things we know that are widely held. Doesn't mean it always changes people's behaviour. So I think we should also focus in a conversation about communication, about what the purpose of that communication is.
The purpose of that communication, do you see what she just said, is to change your behavior. Do you understand why this whole thing in real time, this coronavirus thing, not just their, psychological warfare activity in a predicted pandemic event just before the actual pandemic is, but yes, we are the victims, whether you like it or not, of psychological warfare on a mass scale during this. And it's, again, targeted at different groups, right? Let me explain that. We're going to go back to that in a second. But think about it. Right now, I can't imagine what the markets look like on Monday, but so many people were tricked into thinking that they got some cushion, okay? That maybe their 401ks will eventually recover. That's not going to happen. They prop the market up again, okay? All those bailouts. Then you literally sign over a bunch of these corporations with this, the National Defense Act, right? And the government's now invested in them. You have pure fascism. You have pure fascism in your face. The consolidation of power by the predator class for a check for $1,200? For a check for $2,400? For a check for $3,600? Are you out of your flippin' mind? But most slovenly Americans, and this is the psychological, the Freeman, everything's going to be okay, Jason. We're going to be in church on Easter. And I'm not trying to pick on Southerners or people that believe in God. In fact, shout out to my my Aunt Marianne and my Uncle Blake. Sent me a letter yesterday, and I just want to say thank you. I read the whole thing, and it was very inspiring, Aunt Marianne, and I love you very much, and I thank you for that. It definitely was a moment, okay? And thank you for the encouragement. But anyway, I mean, look at this. We're all being conditioned on certain levels, right? I mean, some people are just staying in without a self-isolation or quarantine. You have the pro wrestling script right now of Trump says, well, maybe we're going to have the New York, Connecticut, New Jersey quarantine, even though, you know, basically self-isolation and limited movement throughout the country is a reality. Most things are shut down. We have the military being deployed. FEMA's there. Where are they actually? Because there's only 5 of these drive-through centers so far. What's actually going on? Apparently, allegedly. Well, I see Broome County, about 60 miles away from me, making hospitals. So anybody who thinks that this isn't going to hit, or that's the psychological warfare, I don't think that's it. I think the predator class at the top doesn't mind killing people. I mean, I'll just be quite honest with you. I don't think they mind. And so, with the people that are going to suffer death or are going to suffer a horrific time, there's so much fear globally on that as well. Again, this is a psychological warfare operation as much as a biological weapon, in my opinion.
And think about what we know about incentivizing the kind of behaviours we want to see. I agree with Tim completely. It needs to be two-way. So governments and people who are organising service delivery, businesses who are trying to operate in this environment, they can do that optimally. But we should also think in a communication sense, it's not just about handing people a piece of knowledge. It's also about how we incentivize them to manage their behaviours, which
incentivize them to manage their behaviors. Now that could go anywhere, again, from staying in and getting that big check to staying off the streets if you don't have your papers, or keeping your business closed if you're not an essential service, or maybe even the authority of the military to keep you in your home. Now, people say, Jason, that's not what, there is no martial law going on right now. There's no parallel there. Rhode Island has 14 checkpoints in their very small state, and they're pulling over anybody with a New York plate. Is that America? The National Guard is doing house-to-house checks, and if they're finding somebody from New York, they're either asking them to leave or making them do a 14-day quarantine. Florida is now implementing similar measures for New Yorkers. So you tell me what kind of incentives those are, ma'am.
Any communicable disease outbreak, behaviour of one sort will minimise your chance of getting a disease versus behaviour of another sort, which may maximise that chance.
Thanks. Chris?
Yeah, I just want to come back to the community. Judging from the statistics, we currently have 4 million survivors. We may in a month have 11 million survivors. Assuming this is like other respiratory pathogens, they're now immune. And they live in the communities, almost by definition, that are affected. So can we turn the survivors into an effective community-based source of accurate information?
So let's stop. Again, representative of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And what is Cuomo talking about? And something I'm not really against, because again, I think this virus is, especially in New York, been here since January, easily. I know there's over 100,000, 124,000 cases in the United States. Guys, there's probably 250,000 to 2 million cases in New York State. Community spread's been around for a long time. All right? So Cuomo's talking about what? Testing for the antibodies to talk about this immunity. Now, there's other talk of the forever boogeyman. It's mutated 40 times. People have caught it twice. It's passed on to animals. Again, I don't know if any of that is factual, okay? And I do know that in the beginning of reporting on quote-unquote mutations or different types, we did have 2 different types, but I wasn't even convinced there was a mutation then. So they continue to talk about herd immunity and using those type of people for data, but then also developing some kind of a vaccine or a medication, the antibodies. And Cuomo talks about that a lot.
They're going to be the least likely to be wanting to spread false information. They're going to be motivated by having survived this outbreak and knowing loved ones who are also affected.
Ed Gosh says keep calm and carry on.
I think they could become a very effective force for intervention at the community level.
Thanks. I'm going to turn to Levon. I just want to ask one other question to think about as Levon's commenting. We've talked a lot about misinformation and flooding good information. We've just started to talk a bit about disinformation and the strategy around that. And Avril or others, after Levon comments, if you have any additional thoughts about the particular approaches to disinformation that may be distinguished from misinformation, it'd be good to hear about those.
Yeah.
But Levon.
Yeah, so I've received a note to say that some bad actors are actually using social media to spread rumors about specific companies in order to profit from short selling.
Profit from short selling. Who profited from short? Oh, Jeff Bezos. He got out pretty quick. Some of those senators. Who was that one guy? I think it was 27 million into 2.6 billion. No one ever. I mean, there's some pretty bad disinformation in our fake pandemic of a coronavirus outbreak from South America in 2019, where some of the predator class may have had some knowledge of this and made some money. Let's control that information too.
So, along the lines of what we've been talking about, this is going to cause companies to come up now to get some of the screen time as well, because they need to spread the correct information. But one thing we haven't spoken about, and I'm wondering whether it's time to talk about this, is a step up from the part of the governments on enforcement actions against fake news, right? Some of us, these are new regulations that come in place about how we deal with fake news.
We deal with fake news, and we decide what real news is. Huh? No. You guys are literally the ones consolidating information for the public. You are the disinformation masters. If anybody believes that there's no chance of something like this being biological warfare, or that a member of the predator class would have short sold, or that the World Bank would take advantage of a population, or that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation would do anything to not promote the truth and their own agenda of eugenics, I said it. That's ludicrous. I must be a bad actor. And truthfully, I would be a bad actor because I'm not the type of drama queen that gets up there and is able to get into character and lie a lot, right? I'm not a good liar. These guys, they got no problem. I mean, they're sitting at the liar's table.
And maybe this is a time for us to showcase some cases where we are able to bring forward some bad actors and leave it before the courts to decide whether they have actually spread some fake.
The courts to decide. Look at the little smirk on his face. The courts to decide. You mean like you're doing to Julian Assange right now for telling the truth? For being a public disclosure organization, a hacktivist, a leaktivist, whatever you want to call it in America? Counterintelligence 2020 to 2022 document. Go check it out. I've done a lot of work on it. But these bad actors, the courts can decide. Let's jail them for questioning the predator class.
News.
So we have about 3 minutes left for this discussion. I just want to throw one more question out for your final thoughts on what if it is, as some people have raised, governments that are spreading misinformation either inadvertently or to some political advantage?
Oh, inadvertently. Inadvertently, the governments are spreading misinformation, or maybe to a political advantage. You mean like George Gao at the CDC about this actual coronavirus outbreak? You mean that guy? The guy sitting at the table, right, Thomas? Right, Mr. Inglesby?
How do we work around that with international organizations or business? Are there particular things that people haven't mentioned already that are worth talking about? But does anyone want to talk about either that or disinformation or other topics in the last couple of minutes?
Sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
So can I have a very quick so I want to touch a little bit about science. I want to follow Chris' talk, because that's a very good challenge. We have survivors. Because we have so many survivors, the epidemic already for 2 months. We have all these modern technologies and the platforms. It's time to think about it, to try to isolate the human antibodies for this, because this is the very serious pandemic, but we want also to see the future. That will help science-based information. Thanks.
When he talked about the technology, he basically says, listen, we already have a social credit score. We were prime time to do this. I mean, our track trace database society is outward. We've got our people knowing what authoritarians we are. I mean, in places like America, they still believe they have freedom.
Thanks. Avril?
Sure. If you have state-sponsored disinformation, there's obviously additional tools that you can bring to bear to try to address that situation.
Like
not
China?
the least of which is bringing together other countries to effect.
As she sits next to the Chinese CDC person, the former National Security Councilwoman, sitting next to the China, talking about disinformation from governments. I mean, the irony is off the charts. It's off the charts.
You know, take action against them for the kind of campaigns that they're propagating. But it's, but generally, I mean, I would say the disinformation, the line between disinformation and misinformation is not always an easy one to find.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is the greatest, you know, way to impact it, in my experience, is not to let it sit. So in other words, find your trusted interlocutors that are capable of saying, this is not acceptable, this is in fact the truth, here's the information. And I think
this is in fact, you know, authoritative source, except for when the authoritative sources is promoting things like stem cells, right? Not once in this entire exercise of a coronavirus, a novel coronavirus outbreak from South America, it's all vaccine, antiviral for now. Not once they talk about stem cells. Not one time. Not once they talk about vitamin C. They do control the narrative. They do talk about bad actors. They do talk about government advantage. And yet the Chinese CDC guy is sitting right next to her. I mean, my goodness gracious.
I think the community of survivors is one example, but there's a whole series, employers, trusted faith leaders, variety of health workers, and so on can be part of that. In addition, obviously, you want to work with the private sector and those who are spreading information generally to see that they can bring things down that are in fact lies or you know, false information that's being put forward as a way to minimize it. But having a source, a national source, an international source, other trusted sources, and really guiding everybody towards that information is one of the most effective ways to deal with a situation like that.
Bow down to global authorities, world government, world banks, the World Health Organization. Follow whatever they say, no matter how many times they lie to you and exploit you and treat you like filth. Because we need to rally around that to protect the predator class that's sitting at this table.
Great. I have Martin, Tim,
If it comes back to misinformation on a level of governments, of countries, then we need, as Sophia mentioned, trustable international organizations, UN, WHO, and they have to come together to get together to spread this trust and to work against this. We cannot hold governments from doing misinformation on their own. So I fully trust on these organizations.
Did he just say, I fully trust our disinformation organizations? Let's rewind that.
We cannot hold governments from doing misinformation on their own. So I fully trust on these organizations.
I fully trust see that Freudian slip? I fully trust our disinformation organization. You gotta love this, right? So in your face. So in your face. And let me just do a microcosm of reality of why you don't trust world organizations, right? First of all, let's talk about what? The United Nations and what was going on with, I don't know, the OPCW. The OPCW, by the way, is an organization that's against the proliferation of chemical weapons. They did an investigation into the Duma attacks of 2018, found there was no attacks, yet the bureaucrats at the top made a report making it seem like there were chemical attacks there. So then WikiLeaks leaks a bunch of documents, and then they have hearings over at the OPCW. And then representatives of the United States sit up there and say it's all Russian propaganda. You see what I'm saying? Why you can't trust this nation state or any nation state or the world governing body that we're supposed to get behind? Because they're all liars. Mr. Gritch says, JB, you should do a video on all these silly coincidences that seem to precede all these events. What an eye-opener it would be. There'd be a ton of it. There'd be a ton of it. You know, right now, kind of going through this, I think it's been pretty successful at opening people's eyes to the fact that this does seem like an orchestrated event that we're going through, something they've war-gamed many times outwardly. And when I say they, again, I'm meaning unelected pieces of filth and minions of the predator class. That's what these people are to me, okay?
Tom, just to build on that, I think you're right. It's important that the UN and WHO remain very clear. But when they challenge governments directly, they often get into this issue of sovereignty. And so I think it's really important not to have that as the only response. I think it's really critical to think about soft power influence, which is other influentials who can call up the head of state, or powerful constituencies within those countries. We've seen this in the context of mobilizing religious leaders in the context of polio, or specific business leaders, where you can soften perhaps a very hard line from government through more stealth entry points rather than trying to punish them through the international health regulations.
Stealth, in other words, covert, in other words, global government using propaganda and psychological warfare against you, says the nice man from the World Bank.
Something like that.
Great. And Adrian, I think last comment.
I think it's important to think about what atypical players in the private sector can we bring to bear in this. So bringing multinational pharmaceutical companies to talk about who are self-interested about why their products are safe could be seen as non-credible. But if I think about, the champion for TB in South Africa was Nando's Chicken. And so I think as we think about these large atypical players who have no credible vested interest in this issue but have a strong voice that's economically differentiated for their governments as well in their country, they're going to listen to them with some respect, I think would be very important.
Okay, we're going to have to leave that conversation there. Thank you all for another very highly valuable discussion. We'll take what you've advised, bring it to the attention of leaders, and we deeply appreciate all you have done here in these meetings. This is concluded.
Great. So that concludes the exercise portion of the event. How did this pandemic turn out? Please watch this epilogue video, and you can see the outcome.
So here's the epilogue video. Don't worry, there's a whole nother video we're going to be breaking down, where they get together in the aftermath. But remember, what did you hear here about the actual health of people and saving lives? Not much, if anything. Just controlling the narrative, keeping people not panicked, investing in privatized and government work, fascistic global authoritarianism. That's what they focused on, not you and me.
The outcome of the CAPS pandemic in Event 201 was catastrophic. 65 million people died in the first 18 months. The outbreak was small at first and initially seemed controllable, but then it started spreading in densely crowded and impoverished neighborhoods of megacities. From that point on, the spread of the disease was explosive. Within 6 months, cases were occurring in nearly every country. At first, wealthy countries with advanced healthcare and public health systems were primarily able to limit the spread of the disease within their borders. As systems became overwhelmed, however, no countries were able to control its spread. And the disease affected people of all socioeconomic status, from the very poor to the extremely rich, from sanitation workers to CEOs and national leaders.
So let's stop that. CEOs and national leaders. Now, I've yet to see a big name CEO or national leader, okay, a billionaire or a real leader go down from this. Infected, sure. But again, this isn't real anyway. This is from a novel coronavirus outbreak in South America.
The economic consequences were dramatic. The high death toll and even greater numbers of sick hurt productivity in many industries. Manufacturers were having trouble filling orders, and countless companies in the service sector simply shut down. The global economy was in a free fall. The GDP down 11%. Stock markets around the world plummeted between 20 and 40%.
Already seeing some of this in real time, by the way, guys. And we haven't even gotten to what the actual impact in this country is going to be.
And headed into a downward cycle of fear and low expectation. Businesses were not borrowing, banks were not lending. Everyone was just hoping to hunker down and weather the storm. While nearly all businesses were affected, certain sectors were especially hard hit. Travel, finance, service, manufacturing, healthcare, and insurance.
I want to focus on a few of those. Finance, healthcare, and insurance. All things the predator class has used to manipulate the masses, all right, for a long time. And more control and consolidation over the last 10, 15, 20 years. This will be a consolidation of all those things at the end, unfortunately. If you think we're getting more rights out of this, that somehow costs will go down, no. No, this is a planned economic implosion. 1929 meets 9/11 is COVID-1984.
Among them, with some major companies going bankrupt. And there were seismic societal consequences as well. The world saw large-scale protests and in some places riots. People were angry about the lack of access to healthcare and medicine, as well as government's inability to protect them from the disease. This led to violent crackdowns in some countries and even martial law.
Violent crackdowns in some countries and even martial law. But people are still telling me we don't have martial law in this country. No. People have their papers, there's quarantine zones. The National Guard is going door to door in Rhode Island to kick out New Yorkers. And it may be a slow-moving, slow-creeping martial law. And there is some kind of like at least pro wrestling style pushback with Cuomo. I'm going to be doing an update on all this, on all the actual activity of today's coronavirus news. But my goodness, it's just so odd that this exercise that, again, takes place in October 2019 got so much of what's happening now right.
Political upheaval became the rule across the globe. The public lost trust in their respective administrations. Several governments fell, while others were desperately striving to hold on to power. This spurred further crackdowns. Attempts to control media messaging, originally aimed only at health-related misinformation, became used increasingly.
See this? I mean, they're literally telling you we're going to control the narrative not only on the coronavirus, but everything else we want to. And it doesn't matter if you thought you had freedom of speech or a Fourth Estate or a First Amendment. We don't care. We were never elected. We don't care.
To quash political dissent. Economists say the economic turmoil caused by such a pandemic will last for years, perhaps a decade. The societal impacts, the loss of faith in government, the distrust of news, and the breakdown of social cohesion could last even longer. We have to ask, did this need to be so bad? Are there things we could have done in the 5 to 10 years leading up to the pandemic that would have lessened the catastrophic consequences?
Who can we blame now? And it'll be like a I don't even know a carousel of blame on this. I mean, there'll be so much blame everywhere after this real outbreak, not the fake outbreak that we're talking about here.
We believe the answer is yes. So, are we, as a global community, now finally ready to do the hard work needed to prepare for the next pandemic?
Bum, bum, bum! And remember, there's one more video that we're going to go over. Again, we'll break it into two spots because this one ends up being over an hour. But I'm going to put this in the chat. Share this with people. Here's something that we're not discussing at all. We're discussing vaccines, antivirals, and some of us are even discussing the intravenous vitamin C, but no one's really talking about the stem cells. So guys, if you want to support me, I got this Rockfin Tuesday. I will be having some kind of a live exclusive, and I'm going to try to pick a time. I got to talk with some people. I'm trying to get more exclusives out there, but again, I'm doing this 2-3 times a day most days, and it's very exhausting. And I think I'm going to do an AMA later on other news outside of the coronavirus, talk about Dan Schneider, talk about Joe Biden, talk about Jeffrey Epstein, and then get the rest of you guys' questions and comments. If you want to financially support me, I'm going to put this in there as well. This is how you do it. $5, $10, $15. It means the world to me. Obviously, we'll start another one on April 1st. Anybody that's still out there and doing good, I'm glad for you. I'm happy. I'm hoping that I can get past whatever this is and for however long it is. But I'm going to show you Cuomo talking about, New York City lockdowns. I'm going to show you Rhode Island. I'm going to show you checkpoints there. I'm going to show you Florida. All that stuff coming up. So make sure you thumbs this video up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe right now. Become a member of the Burmis Brigade. And remember, guys, it's not about left or right. It's always about right and wrong. That's what it's about, all right? And we're trying to do the right thing here with as much correct information as we can and expose that predator class. So I love you, and I'll see you on the flip.